And the clock in front of you is the 1950 or 1951 Devon manual clock, and it was made by the Smiths Enfield Company. And just to start the video off, I want to speak about the Enfield Clock Company because it's quite an interesting story and quite an interesting company, in fact. Now, the company was first began in 1929 in Britain. However, it was ironically started by Germans, and therefore most of the workers were in fact also German. And it began making clocks for the public in 1931/1932. However, after only a year of production, they found that the German companies overseas were making such cheap and affordable clocks that many people were just buying them from there, and therefore their company was in a bit of a mess financially and wasn't doing as well as it should have been doing. So therefore, at the end of 1933, the Smiths Clock Company bought over the Enfield Clock Company. However, they allowed the Enfield Clock Company to keep their name so long as they continued to make the clocks for Smiths. So for many years, up until 1949, possibly 1948-49, the clocks were sold under simply Enfield Clock Company or Smiths Enfield. In 1939, production obviously stopped because the German workers were interned. They had to go back to Germany because obviously Britain went to war with Germany. During that time, Smiths became more and more dominant in the Smiths Enfield Clock Company, and we later found that the Enfield was completely gone and it was now just Smiths. So this is one of their clocks. Obviously only made for 2 years. I picked this up not so long ago, and someone had varnished the cabinet with thick varnish, you know, just with a paintbrush, and they'd painted all over the dial, and oh, it just looked awful. And I decided that I was going to take it on and restore it, which I have. I restored the case. What I done is I stripped it, I reapplied some furniture restorer and dye, and then I polished it, and it's come out looking really good. These cases, when sold from the factory, were not shine, they were matte finish. They had a slight shine, but that was it, you know. So whenever you come across one of these, it's extremely shined up, you know. That's not original. So I put this back to how it should have been. Now this is a dual movement clock. Between clockmakers you'll hear the terms. You get a single train, a dual train, and a triple train clock. Now a single train only tells time, it doesn't have a chime mechanism. Now obviously this clock is a dual train, as you can see the 2 winding holes, and a 3 train clock usually contains a Westminster chime or a chime of some other description. This clock solely chimes on the half hour once, and on the hour it chimes the number for whichever it is. So you can see the clock's at 6. A moment ago that would have chimed, and that would have been 6 beats of the gong. So just to give you guys an idea, what you've done is you opened your dial. So this is the bezel, it's on a door, on a hinge, and you wind your clock up. Now the right hand side you see here, this is to wind up the clock only. The other side's for the chime. So for those of you who don't like a chiming clock, you simply wouldn't wind up the left hand side chime, or the left hand side hole here. You would only wind up this one. But many people like the chiming sound of a clock, so they wind both up. So to let you hear the chime, obviously as if the clock was working. The one thing I should point out, mechanical clocks should only ever be turned, their hands, clockwise. The mechanism was not made to be turned anti-clockwise. So as it would come up to half past, this is what it would sound like. You would get one chime, okay, one beat of the gong. Obviously on the hour, you'd get the number of hours, but for those of you who don't like that gonging sound, I won't put you through it. I'm used to it, I quite like it, but it's just a matter of opinion. So this is a clock. The cabinet has come out pretty nice. I think it's came out as good as it possibly ever could. That's the Smiths Enfield logo you see there. And the hands were held on by a pin, being a late, well, you know, people argue that this clock was actually made in 1949. However, I can assure you this was a 1950 release, but they did in fact use this dial on a clock in 1949 called the Warwick. And just to show you, I have a book here which clearly shows the Warwick. That clock there is a Warwick. You can see it's the exact same dial, and the 49 means it was made for 1 year in 1949. I in fact have that clock, and I'll show you in due course, but the clock used I've just looked at is the Devon.